The afternoon sun glinted off the hood of the millionaire's black luxury car, parked carelessly near the curb as if the street itself belonged to him. His driver waited nearby, silent and stiff, while the millionaire tapped his watch, irritated by time he felt was too valuable to waste. The street around them was alive, honking horns, shouting vendors, footsteps rushing past, but none of it seemed real to him. It was just background noise in a life where money had long ago dulled surprise and empathy. That was when the young flower vendor stepped closer. He couldn't have been more than 25. Dust clung to his shoes, and his shirt had been washed so many times it had lost its original color. In his hands, he carried a small bundle of red roses, their petals fresh despite the heat. He offered a polite smile and spoke in hesitant English, his voice respectful. "Sir, would you like to buy roses?" "Very good roses." The millionaire barely looked at the flowers. Instead, he studied the vendor like an object, something small, temporary, easily dismissed. A slow grin spread across his face, the kind that comes from boredom mixed with arrogance. He raised his voice just enough to be heard by others nearby. "Tell you what," he said, chuckling, "sell me these roses in Arabic. Proper Arabic, and I'll give you $100,000. A few people nearby laughed. Some shook their heads, others paused, sensing humiliation disguised as humor. The millionaire crossed his arms, confident. To him, Arabic was not a living language, it was a tool he used for business deals and flashy speeches, not something a poor street vendor could possibly command with elegance. The vendor stood still, the roses trembling slightly in his hands. He felt the weight of many eyes on him now. The offer hung in the air, heavy and sharp. $100,000, a fortune, enough to change everything. Yet the tone behind the words was clear. It wasn't an opportunity, it was a challenge meant to embarrass. The millionaire leaned back against his car, satisfied with his performance, already certain of the outcome. In his mind, the scene was over. The joke had been made. The power had been displayed. He had no idea that this moment, meant to mock, was about to unravel everything he thought he understood. The vendor's fingers tightened around the stems of the roses. For a heartbeat, he looked down at the bundle, as if drawing strength from their delicate petals. Then, he lifted his head, and a calm confidence settled over him. The noise of the street, the honking cars, the shouting vendors, the impatient footsteps, faded like mist. All eyes were now on him, not out of mockery, but out of curiosity. He began to speak. At first, it was soft, almost musical, in flawless classical Arabic, each word flowing like a ribbon in the wind. The crowd, many of whom didn't understand the language, paused nonetheless, captivated by the rhythm, the weight, the sincerity of the words. He didn't simply sell the roses, he described them. He spoke of their resilience, how they bloomed despite harsh sun and poor soil. He spoke of love and patience, of gestures that cannot be bought but must be offered with intention. His voice had a cadence that made even the most skeptical listener lean in, straining to catch every syllable. The millionaire's smirk faltered. He tried to process what he was hearing. The Arabic was not broken, not crude, it was pure, elegant, precise. It carried history and poetry in every syllable, a richness he had long forgotten existed. He remembered fleeting fragments of the language from his childhood, words he had once known but abandoned for convenience and wealth. Suddenly, those memories hit him like waves, the voice of a grandmother reading prayers, the taste of home-cooked meals, the quiet dignity of a culture he had left behind. People around them had stopped moving. Phones, once raised to record the moment, now hovered uncertainly in midair. Faces that had smiled at the millionaire's joke were now blank, mesmerized. There was something almost sacred in the way the vendor wove the story of roses with words. Each sentence painted pictures. A single flower pushing through cracked pavement, a small act of kindness that could outshine a lifetime of money, the quiet dignity of giving without expectation. The millionaire opened his mouth to speak, to mock, to dismiss, but no words came. His laughter, so certain moments ago, had disappeared. For the first time that day, he felt a hollow uncertainty, a twinge of vulnerability. The street had become silent in a strange, powerful way, as if the vendor's voice had built an invisible dome around them, a space where wealth and status were meaningless. The vendor's eyes, dark and steady, met the millionaire's. There was no fear, no hesitation, only quiet authority. In that gaze, the millionaire realized something shocking. He had underestimated this young man, and not just underestimated him, but the power of words, of culture, of truth delivered with integrity. The roses in his hands were no longer just flowers. They had become a bridge between worlds, the small and the mighty, the poor and the wealthy, the forgotten and the remembered. And with that realization, the millionaire froze, unable to break the spell. The vendor's words lingered in the air, each one striking with subtle force, like ripples expanding across a still pond. The crowd around them had gone quiet, not a single car horn, not a single shout piercing the moment. Even the city itself seemed to pause, as if the universe had leaned in to listen. The millionaire, usually a man who commanded attention with every gesture, felt powerless. His arms, crossed just moments ago in confidence, now hung loosely at his sides. He could not speak. He could not move. The vendor continued, softer now, but with a weight that pressed into the millionaire's chest. He spoke of roses growing in dust, watered not by riches but by struggle. He spoke of love offered freely, not bought with gold or applause. He described dignity that survives hardship and kindness that blooms even in neglect. Each phrase seemed to plant a seed inside the millionaire, forcing him to confront truths he had long ignored. The language, rich and precise, carried a moral gravity he could not evade. Memories he had buried for years began to surface. He saw his grandmother's hands folded in prayer, heard her gentle voice whispering words in Arabic he had once understood but no longer practiced. He remembered a time when life was simpler, when respect and honor meant more than wealth or status. A pang of regret pierced him, sharp, unrelenting. How had he become so blind? How had he allowed money to define him while ignoring the very roots that had nurtured him? The millionaire's gaze shifted from the roses to the vendor's eyes. There was no malice there, no pride, only a quiet strength. In that gaze, he felt small, exposed, stripped of the armor of arrogance he wore so comfortably. He tried to move, to speak, but his voice was trapped, his hands trembling slightly as if they no longer belonged to him. The world he had controlled with contracts, numbers, and deals had no sway here. Not against words that carried meaning. Around them, the crowd remained motionless, sensing the gravity of the moment. Phones were lowered, whispers hushed, and even the air seemed charged with anticipation. It was a rare, almost sacred pause, an acknowledgement that something profound had unfolded in the middle of a bustling street. The vendor finally fell, silent, letting the roses rest lightly in his hands. And in that silence, the millionaire remained frozen. His mind raced, heart pounding, a mixture of awe, shame, and disbelief washing over him. He realized that some lessons cannot be taught by money, some truths cannot be purchased, and some voices, simple, honest, powerful, have the ability to stop even the richest man in his tracks. For the first time in his life, he understood that value cannot always be measured in dollars. And in that understanding, he remained motionless, rooted to the spot, watching the young vendor as if he were witnessing a miracle. The street seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had gripped it since the vendor's words began. The roses rested gently in his hands, bright against the dust and grime of the city sidewalk. The vendor looked calmly at the millionaire, his eyes steady, unflinching. He had spoken, he had shared truth, and now it was time to see what the world would do with it. The millionaire, still frozen, reached slowly for his wallet. Each motion felt heavy, as though gravity had doubled, as though his hands carried the weight of every arrogance he had ever displayed. He had promised $100,000, he had no choice but to honor it. But even as he slid the bills toward the young man, something had shifted. The money felt insignificant in his hand, almost laughable in the face of what had just occurred. No contract, no signature, no bank account could measure the power of the words he had just heard. He cleared his throat, his voice shaky. Why are you selling these roses? He asked, the words tasting foreign in his own mouth. For years, he had bought everything, commanded everything, but now, he could not comprehend the simplest act of honesty. The vendor smiled gently, lifting the bundle to show their vibrant petals. To live with honor, he replied softly, first in Arabic, then in English for those around who did not understand. Not for wealth, not for fame, but because every flower, every gesture, has its value if given with truth. The millionaire handed over the money, every single bill, but it felt hollow in his hands. The transaction, while legally complete, had nothing to do with the real lesson. His chest tightened as he realized he had been paying for something money could not buy: humility, awareness, and a sudden understanding of what he had lost in pursuit of wealth. The vendor bowed slightly, and without waiting for further instruction, turned and walked away. The roses remained in his hands, unsold in the traditional sense, yet they were priceless. Every passerby who had witnessed the scene felt it too: the weight of integrity, the quiet power of words, and the reminder that wealth is fleeting, but respect and honor endure. The millionaire remained frozen, staring after him. For the first time in decades, he felt exposed, vulnerable, small, but also awakened. He understood, painfully, that some lessons cannot be bought, some moments cannot be replicated, and some voices, no matter how humble the speaker, have the power to stop even the richest man in his tracks. As the vendor disappeared into the bustling city, the millionaire finally sank into the seat of his car. The money was gone, but a heavier payment had been made: a reckoning with pride, with loss, with the truth he could no longer ignore. And in that reckoning, he knew life would never feel the same again.